Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of the 33 Fuel vlog. My name is Warren. I'm one of the co-founders here at 33 Fuel, and it gives me great pleasure, joy, delight, and excitement to welcome you to this conversation with Martin Yelling. Martin is a man who is steeped in all things running. Formerly an international level runner, he progressed to become an elite level duathlete. He then decided he tried hand at triathlon, moving into Ironman, and ultimately competing in the World Championships in Kona. He's represented Team GB in all manner of running disciplines. These days, he's a very experienced coach through his own coaching company, Yelling Performance, and he is also the London Marathon's go-to coach when they need a coach to talk to as many people as possible. Beyond this, Martin is also the co-founder and host of the Marathon Talk podcast, which might just be the longest running podcast there is. 500 plus episodes old. Martin and his co-host Tom first started Marathon Talk a decade ago. This is a long time before podcasting was even cool. But being cool isn't really Martin's thing. Being true to himself is. And that's what really comes through in this conversation, because what we're looking at is, what do you do when the thing you love, in this case running, is not necessarily firing you up the way it used to? How do you ride that roller coaster? How do you keep pushing your boundaries, setting new goals? How do you keep it fresh? How do you keep it shaken up? Martin is a man who can unpick this all day long, and he has so much great value to give in terms of outlook and how we can maybe be a little kinder to ourselves as athletes as we push for those better performances, but also try and live our lives the best way we can at the same time. Because that's what we're all about at 33 Fuel. Our mission is giving athletes the best possible tools to unlock the best possible versions of themselves. And we do that through sharing great content like this from great thought leaders like Martin on our podcast, our vlog, and our social media. And we also do it in store at 33fuel.com with the finest, the best, the tastiest, the most rootingest, tootingest, all natural sports nutrition. So if you're feeling a bit peckish, you need something for your next race, you need something for training, or your existing nutrition is frankly not floating your boat and you're looking for an upgrade, well, head into 33fuel.com and check it out. So with all of that out of the way, let's get to this conversation with Martin Yelling. Martin Yelling, thank you so much for coming to join us on the podcast.
You're welcome. It's always a pleasure.
Well, it's a great pleasure to have you here. And I know when we spoke the other day, running wasn't entirely your favourite thing at the time. There's all sorts of clouds swirling around in the world of elite running. It's a bit murky in places. It's not something we necessarily want to see. Who knows what's going to come out of it? But if we follow that path, we're going to end up in a very murky place. And actually,
it sounds like Brexit.
there's that as well. I'm basically ignoring all of these things because when you come back to it, Brexit may not be all right, but running really is all right, I think. So I thought we'd look at the good things in running because I think that's something you know a lot about. And I thought we'd start it really simply and personally, because let's face it, running is the simplest, best, easiest thing we can pretty much do for ourselves ever, which also conveniently ties into your charity Stormbreak, which we'll be having a little chat about later as well. Mm-hmm. But running has been something that you've built your whole life around. And I wondered sort of how did it come about? Was running always something that was going to be there for you and you then followed that as a career? Or was it you were looking for something to do and realised you liked running and put them together that way?
Not really. I think a couple of things is running is one thing. You said running is something you said running is the thing, which is really simple and really easy. And I agree with you, it is. It's not the only thing. It just so happens that it kind of resonates with me and has formed one strong strand of what's become kind of to represent who I am as an almost grown up. So like there's, different kind of strands of, I think, what makes me a person, what makes me human, and running has always been one of those. And so to answer your question about how that started, I think that probably started because I could do it. And when I say I could do it, that meant I seemed for some reason to find it easier than other people when I was a child. So I could run. And I also loved to do it for reasons that I know as a grown up now were because it gave me some control. I could do it on my own. I could get away from things. I enjoyed being outside. Actually, still things that I enjoy, as a nearly 48-year-old. But when I was a 7-year-old, I didn't know those things. So I guess what's happened is I've spent 40 years nurturing those things.
Well, you've not done a bad job of it along the way. I mean, let's face it, the international and the elite running days were pretty decent, to say the least. You also put in.
Well, I can't take much credit actually, like really, because it's tough. So one of my qualities, Warren, which isn't always a good one, is that I'm a slight kind of ambitious, aspirational perfectionist with a few obsessive tendencies. Like you roll all of those things into one, and it's both an encouraging and affirming way to live, but it's also a slightly problematic, destructive way to live. So I can't take much credit for any of the athletic stuff because I could do it. I chose my parents carefully. It didn't come that difficult to me to do it. I was an international runner, but of a relatively what I call kind of sub-elite standard. I finished in the top 10 in the national cross-country championships, gained some minor international running vests, did some duathlon stuff and some multi-sport at international level for the GB elite team in what seems like, an entire lifetime or several ago. I think I went to something like 7 world and European championships. But mostly, I guess, my exposure to international running came through carrying my wife's bags and supporting Liz. She went to a couple of Olympics and won a Commonwealth Games medal in the marathon. So I think a lot of my exposure to that stuff came through and with Liz rather than off my own kind of back.
But then I think you put it very nicely, the obsessive tendencies and the perfectionist tendencies being both a good and bad thing. But without wanting to give us too much risk of heading into the dark side of all the bad things about running, if you have those tendencies, does that mean you have not been fully able to enjoy what you've necessarily achieved in the past because actually what you always wanted was the next step up, therefore it was never quite enough? Whereas,
well, I think that's something with runners. Yeah. Well, that's an interesting observation and one that, it's this sort of thing that when you step off the track, having done a run session or you run a 10K and you've run a PB and you've been training for some time for that result and someone says to you, how did you go? And I remember days, this is not now, but I remember days when running what for me then was a quicker time, being disappointed. Being disappointed because I think, oh, well, I could have done that. So I would finish a track session in training and think, well, I'll just do one more. Or I could have just done that. Or if only I'd gone that few seconds faster. So there is an element when you're in the moment touching it so closely and when it's a really a significant part of your life from a performance outcome point of view that you take what are brilliant performances in hindsight for granted. And you don't appreciate them as much as you should, which is why now, in my own coaching, I very much encourage people to stop and pause and reflect on where they find themselves, the hard work that it's taken to get them there, and, the kind of sheer joy and accomplishment and pleasure that they can get out of that situation, even if it doesn't produce the outcome which was the desired one from the start for them.
Well, because there's certainly a case that you can't always control the outcome. To be fair, running is often a little more binary perhaps than, let's say, I don't know, Brexit. But with running, if you do the work and if you follow the plan, you have a good chance of achieving certain goals depending on how lofty they may be. And that process is really where the satisfaction is often most readily found, but is often most readily ignored. And I understand with your former elite focus, it was very hard to get the enjoyment from what was being achieved. You took it for granted if it was good, but if it wasn't up to your stellar standard, maybe you gave yourself a hard time, it wasn't good enough. How have you managed that with time? Because I get the impression you're probably a lot easier and better with yourself now than you possibly were as a competitive athlete.
Yeah, I think you get better with experience at managing those outcomes a little bit. So for me, with what time teaches me is I'm never going to be faster than I was. So where I use time as a key performance indicator, or where I used time as a key kind of outcome and performance indicator, I can no longer use time. Because if that's the measure, I'm never going to get any better. So if the only measure I use is how fast I run, then I'm never going to get quicker. I'm never going to get better. So if I continue to be driven by time, then I'd be continually disappointed. So what I think I am good at doing is, that's why I still run after 40 years of being a runner, is I'm able to facilitate great, rich internal satisfaction from the experience of running. And so when I was in my 20s, that might have been to run fast. When I'm in my 40s, that's because I actually want to, be outside and be in nature, or running along the beach, or running to a destination to see something, or experiencing the run, or de-stressing from the day, but it's not about, can I run faster? That said, there are still times when I think, I'm just gonna go and enjoy a proper smash up session, but I'm not motivated by the pace that I run at, the distance that I covered relative to the runner that I was 15 years ago. I might be motivated relative to the runner that I was last week or the week before. So it's quite a segmented look at, how you frame running for your own benefit. Yeah, and I think it's that's meant I've stayed engaged as a runner for so many years.
Now, that leads rather nicely into a thought I had while you were saying that. 40 years running. I appreciate. I appreciate
40 years. That's almost as old as that jumper you're wearing, isn't it?
This one is straight out of the 1960s, was it? But it's a bit chilly in here.
Proper suave.
For anyone who's on the podcast, this is a nice turtleneck I'm sporting here, which is quite toasty this afternoon, I've got to say.
It's black, it's suave, it's sophisticated.
And we're both old enough to remember the milk tray ads, which I have to say deep down is probably why I bought it.
Is that your aspiration? I'm expecting you to scale that wall behind you and deliver a packet of chocolates.
Any minute, I might come swinging through the window on a rope. But I might not leave you the rose. That would be a bit weird.
Go on, you'd be right.
No,
go on, what were you going to say?
40 years running, right? A lot of people understand, if you've been in the sport professionally, competitively from a young age, then you can put those kinds of years in if running gives you the fire and you get what you want from it. But for a lot of amateur runners, maybe they ran a bit as kids, and then you come back to it after a break. And so, a 5-year run streak, can we say, a 10-year run streak would be quite a lot. 40 years, what are the things that you would say are the keys to managing longevity in running, both, I think, emotionally and physically? Because the body changes, the body will manage it, but also sometimes the mind will manage it better and other times not. So you must have been through so many cycles within that 40 years. And I say run streak, I don't mean like a Ron Hill run every day for 40 years.
I definitely haven't run every day.
No, but I think that's possibly a bit extreme for many as well. But you've continually been doing it that long. That's
running's been a thread. Yeah, running's definitely been a thread of my existence for 40 years.
Yeah.
So there's not been many months that have gone past in those 40 years when I haven't run. Obviously, it's different when between 7 and 17, up until I was, I guess, probably 15, 7 to 15, running was very unstructured. And I did it through play and I was with my friends and I didn't really think of myself as a runner. Yeah, so there was nothing in my life between 7 and 15 that meant I was a runner. My wife, for example, went to the running club at age 9 because her mum went to the running club and so she ran. But I didn't really do that. I would run at school. I would represent, my school in the cross countries and, on the track. And I'd do that kind of, I ran, but it wasn't something I did. And then when I got to 14 or 15, I started with my Yeovil Olympiads running club in Somerset where I grew up. And then it became a bit more structured. And probably from 15 or 16, I started thinking, I really enjoy doing this. And I spent 20 years trying to run faster. Then I snapped an Achilles tendon and started bike riding and, swim or trying to swim and ended up doing Ironman triathlon and duathlon, all that stuff. So running was still important, but the focus was still very much on time. So you can almost work in decades, spreading across the 4 decades of, 7 to 17, I was enjoying, but in a different way. It was play and fun and very little competition that I would do at school. And then 17 to 27, I was probably quite a serious runner, trying to just run faster. And then 27 to 37, I was about multi-sport and the focus was slightly different. And then 37 to 47, I'd finished kind of a triathlon career and running was about enjoyment and transitioning from serious sport to recreational sport and recreational running and more coaching and more helping other people improve their running and learning about, what makes other people tick. And then here we are, 48. There you go.
Simple. So all you've got to do is just consistently reinvent yourself every 10 years. And there we go, bingo. Even though one snapped Achilles in the middle, we have a seamless 40-year.
Yeah, I'm not sure about so what you've got to do is, you were right in your opener that running is an incredibly simple thing. And it is. You get confused and it gets complicated when people expect things from it that it can't give.
Interesting point.
Where you can frame the fundamentals of what you want to get from your running so that you get it back, it's always going to give to you. So it's always going to give. It's always going to give. So if what you want is to frame your running because it enables you to, do nothing more than enjoy some time outside socially with your friends or on your own, then you can get that from it. It's so what I've been able to do is, I think, although I've never really thought about it like this, to position those blocks of what makes up running and a runner within what I want to get from running so that I'm constantly satisfied. My kind of appetite from running is constantly, roughly satisfied from my engagement with it. If at 47 I was saying I want to run faster than I did at 27, that's unlikely. So I would be doubtful whether I would be able to satisfy my running appetite, whereas I can do a ton of other things with it. Does that make sense?
Does make sense. So when you say where running can fall down is when people expect something from it it can't give. And if I'm going from what you said, I'm guessing one of the examples would be if your need from running was to be faster than you were at 27, then that's going to be a tall order given the level you went to at 27. So are there any other areas you think where people can trip themselves up with asking for something from running that it can't deliver?
Not when you get it right. Not when you get the ask right. The problem is when you get the ask wrong. So running's never going to solve, all of my issues. For example, if I think to myself, actually, and I'm not this person, but if I was, and I was particularly unhappy in my life, and I was looking to running for everything, so I see lots of people for whom this is an issue, particularly those who perhaps are recovering from addiction or living with addictive behavior, and they supplement running for that. So they look to running to give them everything that other things did for them in a previous life, for example. So they supplement it with running. So the ask is, I want everything that I had, but I want it from running. And then they break their leg, or they get injured, or something happens where they cannot run. And of course, the world tends to cave back in again. And that's when, running can't give them what they're looking for from it. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're using
it sounds a bit all wafty in philosophy, doesn't it? And like we're philosophizing a little bit.
There's
but I'm just trying to think about your question.
But I think there's something that running, to come back to it, it's the simplest, best thing we could do for ourselves. If it's
one of the simplest, best things we can do for ourselves.
True.
So another, in that sense, another simple and great things we can do for ourselves is just sit calmly and sit still. But I find that much harder than I find going for a run. But to sit calmly and to sit still and to, let's take learning meditation as a skill. It can be amazingly beneficial to your wellness. It can be amazingly beneficial to your running. Is that some people find it easier than others, but it's really difficult but simple. Running is difficult but simple. If you were to say, right, Warren, what I want you to do is to sit still in your, every day for 15 minutes. It doesn't really matter where you are now. It looks perfect because it looks really blank. But sit still for 15 minutes. What happens in that 15 minutes? It's quite difficult to do, but it's simple.
You're right. I have been trying it for several years, and yes, it never gets easier, but I had to keep reminding myself with the meditation that it's the point of showing up and doing it, even if you feel like you actually just spent 15 minutes sat there thinking. As long as I remembered at some point to stop the thinking and go back to anything as simple as my breath, but get a tangible result. I don't know. It certainly feels like a good thing, though. It feels like another little decompress. Is it something you've played around with? Is it something you've indulged in?
A little bit, although I find running can be quite meditative sometimes. So for me, it's quite a, when you get, that experience when you get your run right, and it might be that the weather's right, or the pace is right, or you're pushing right, you're flowing, you're balanced, you're really poised, you feel like you can run for more, you finish and you think, I could carry on, or the workout didn't trouble you, you kind of get back feeling better than when you left. And in my eyes, that's what running should do. Every run you go for should leave you feeling better than before you went for it in some way or another. Whether if you're training really hard, and you've got a specific workout goal or a race aspiration, then doing that run should put you in a better place towards that aspiration than not doing it. In the same sense, if you're, wanting to be calmer that day, or you want some fresh air that day, you want to be with your friends that day, then doing that run should put you in a better place than before you went out for it.
Now that raises an interesting point around probably two things, but the first one that comes up is when you have a focused race goal and a performance goal, you may have a focused training program as well, which will demand of you certain runs of certain distances, times, or whatever on certain days in order to execute. And I personally have always found those hard. And I think it's possibly...
What, following a training plan?
Yes. Yeah. To follow one accurately...
Why is it hard? Why do you find it hard?
I think I rebel against the dogmatic nature. I don't know. Maybe I just rebel against being told what to do. But I think also because work is very intense and demands a lot from me, then if my running starts to feel like it demands a lot from me as well, rather than being a release and an enjoyment, I can find that difficult. Now, I wonder if this is something you've seen with other athletes you coach. Is there an area where people can be forcing themselves through running without the enjoyment? Is that necessary? Is it common? Should you just man up and get on and do the work? How do you balance that where I think for me, I feel you're on that edge of turning what can be a very positive stress into a negative one.
It's easy
does that ring any
to
bells?
push. Yeah, it's really easy, and you see that all the time. You know, I definitely don't think you should woman or man up to push through a running obstacle. So, you know, there's times when actually you've got to be really sensible and listen, and there's times where you've got to be reflective and respond. So the difference being, you're really tired if you're following a training plan. You're really tired, you don't want to do it, you've had a long day, you've got a big session on the plan, you're just not up for it. There's a difference between it being purely a motivational thing. You're not up for it because you can't be bothered to do it. And you're not up for it because you're genuinely too tired and doing it's going to push you over the edge. And so when you think to yourself, actually, this is a step too far, you should back off and not do it, or just do, 20, 30 minute easy run, not do the big session. But when you think, actually, I'm just not bothered, I'm not motivated to do it, often going to do it helps you feel better about doing it. The caveat being, if you're not sure, you should not do it, because the likelihood is, if you're not sure, it means the former rather than the latter. So it means the former, which is you're too tired, and it's probably going to tip you over. Whereas if you're sure and you think, actually, I can't be bothered, then you should just give yourself a little word and get out there.
Is there something
It happens all the time, Warren.
Okay, is there something to be said in those situations for if you're not sure? Is this just because I'm being a bit too lazy, or is this genuinely because I'm a little on the edge of burning myself out right now and the session's quite a tough one? Is there anything to be said for just, I'll get the shoes on, I'll go 10 minutes. If I still feel against this idea 10 minutes in, then I'll pull the pin as a kind of final acid test if you're not sure whether you're on the line or not.
Yeah, of course. Flexibility is two things. A really good training plan will have some flexibility in it anyway. So you can adapt it and tweak it a little bit. And flex is really important. So when people can't flex, they don't have a great relationship with their running, because an inability to flex on your running training plan is a lack of control over it, really. And it shows that the plan and the runs have a control over you. Whereas actually what you want is you need that adaptability and flexibility to go, this isn't right, I'd still like to go for a run, but I'm not going to do this today. And then, so the second thing is, training plans work better when the person following the plan feels empowered and owns the plan, which is often the problem when you pull a generic plan off the internet, and it's got no relevance for you, it's a bit random, it's just way too generic. Why you lose your motivation in following it? So for you, it feels like, well, it's not really about helping Warren, because it isn't. Whereas if you had if you were following a plan that you were vested in, that you had some engagement in writing, that fitted with your schedule, so it wouldn't feel a burden, that you felt comfortable in flexing, then you're more likely to do it and complete it.
And that
makes sense?
That would sound much more like what I would call a plan, whereas the former is like feels more dogmatic, and probably that is the mistake I've made in the past. I've never had a custom coach plan. I have pulled them off the internet.
Yeah, it's a bit like a style of coaching. So some people, when they coach, will be very didactic and they want to be seen as the expert the kind of ego in the relationship, and they will be the one that says, I'm the figurehead here. I know I have all the knowledge. Here is my plan that I have written. I am, you must follow this, and they might get twitchy if you don't. And then there's another style of coaching, which is probably my style, which is much more open, and much more about working with somebody rather than telling them what to do. Asking them questions and supporting and guiding and shaping their training in a way that they feel really engaged with, as opposed to being a dictator around the training that they might want to do. And different people respond to different styles of coaching. Some people like to be, right, this is what you're going to do, this is how you need to do it, and this is when you're going to do it. And other people like a little bit more flexibility. For me, what I think is that for people I personally coach with, and that's not that many, but I try and navigate that journey a little bit with them. Sometimes I'll say, will you just get on with it? You just need to do this. And sometimes I'll go, well, what do you feel would be right for you today? And we'll look at it slightly differently.
So a more flexible approach to it for them and for you.
Definitely. Well, from my experience, that's what helps other people. Yeah, some people are desperately uncomfortable with it, though. So, it's like, they just get uncomfortable with it, but it works in the long run.
Well, maybe there's something to be said for if you are in the situation of looking for a running coach. I think what you've put out really clearly there is running coaching is not all the same, and not every person requires the same sort of coaching, wants the same sort of coaching, or what works for one person may not work for another at all.
Yeah.
Rather than thinking, I need a running coach, this person is a running coach, therefore it must be right. If it doesn't feel right, I'm going through some stuff with some accountancy changes recently in the business. That's fascinating.
Lovely.
But I used to think 15 years ago, well, an accountant's an accountant, right? It's all black and white, it's all numbers. Well, no, it's got a lot of shades of grey, and there's a lot of interpretation, and different firms work different ways. So you can't just go, I need an accountant, that's an accountant, thank you very much. But it feels like run coaches are the same thing. And even if someone recommends one to you, you may not know that it's a fit until you've tried a bit.
Yeah, it's people, isn't it? I'm a big fan in everything I do of building relationships and working on those relationships in a very meaningful, authentic way, which is loaded with integrity. And if I don't do that, I don't feel like I'm representing who I am very well and very clearly. I'm not articulating that very well. So it's really important to me to have those things, and that counts in a coaching relationship as well. Whereas some people don't want those things. They simply want, tell me what to do, whereas I kind of am a little bit different in that. And the priority for me is the person above the athletic result or outcome. So my interest is in you as a person. And if you happen to be motivated by putting one foot in front of the other a bit faster than you have done before, then we would look at how doing that can help shape you as a person, support you as a person. We do that through your relationship with running and your relationship with other people. Now,
to go away from the technical coaching side and the nuts and bolts of all of that, let's get to something really maybe a bit simpler. Your favourite run of the last 12 months, you can choose one. What have you got for me? What comes to mind?
Oh man,
could be a race
over the last 12 months.
Yeah, or just since January. How about in the year of 2019?
So my favourite run this year.
Yeah.
So I love running on. There's three things I love about running: running in the mountains, running on the coast, preferably both, but there are not very many places you can do that. And running with people, running with other people. I'm not a big fan anymore of doing competitive races. So my highlight runs are usually me on my own somewhere lovely. So that might be on the Southwest Coast Path. I'm lucky enough to live near some of the Southwest Coast Path. So I love running, along sections of that. There's a little section in Cornwall that I love from Padstow to Trevone, kind of a little 8 mile or so circuit that I just love going on when I'm down that way. I also, I went to Kenya to do a run with my neighbour Tim and a charity called Five Talents, and we did a marathon. And that was a fantastic run because the place was incredible, views over the Rift Valley, and the people were brilliant to be around. So that was an incredible experience. Probably those. Somewhere that I know and somewhere that was new to me. Southwest Coast Path and a run in Kenya.
I love the point you make about mountains being on the coast. Yeah. Kenya clearly would hit home for so many reasons, and I can really empathise with a lot of that because in my own running, I have found that it's the places running can take me and the experiences I can have that I enjoy more than the running itself. Yeah. Put me on a treadmill, I don't have very much to give. But for a lot of people, if you live in a place, work in a place, your kids are at school in a place, maybe that place is not near the Southwest Coast Path. I find being back in central London now for a long stretch, well, it's fine for a number of things. It's pretty rubbish for running. But I can find enjoyable runs, but I have to work harder at it than if I were somewhere with trails on the doorstep or mountains. What would be your recommendations for trying to keep running enjoyable and fresh when maybe you don't have the ability to travel around a huge amount? Is it just a question of turning left out the door instead of right one day, or can we find things
mixing
through
it up?
Strava now?
Mixing it up definitely helps. So changing the route, changing where you go, just exploring, because even if you live in central London, there's a ton of exploring to be done. It's a fascinating place to run if you explore. So people tend to just slip into their sort of comfy running routes because they're easy and convenient and all the things they know. Whereas dipping a little bit outside of that can reinvent some of the running a little bit. Also just kind of mashing up the training completely. So just veer off in a completely different direction. Think about, okay, I'm not going to do that. I've done it that way for years and years and years. I'm going to park that and I'm going to radically change the way I do my running training, aiming for shorter, less. So bringing in some real variation to your running. I think the third thing, and probably the biggest, is company is something great. I actually do a lot of running on my own, but I love running with other people. So if I arrange to meet someone, I love it because it gets me out and it gets me going and I just run at their pace. The thing I do a lot more now that I never used to, I learnt this with cycling, is when I used to go for a bike ride with a big group, we'd always stop and have a coffee. Like we would actually do a coffee run. Go out on our bikes, we'd chat the whole way, we'd stop, we'd have a coffee and we'd ride home again. But that was I never did that in running. But now right. I do that in running all the time. All the time. I'll meet a mate, we'll go for a run, we'll stop, we'll have a little coffee together, we'll stop mid-run, and we'll run back again, and so making the run a real social experience matters too. Yeah.
That's a brilliant idea, because you're right, the coffee stop is integral to the Sunday ride, yet has no place.
Yeah, but we
really
don't do it in running, and we should do.
Yeah. I mean, do you find any issues with getting started again? I mean, cycling has a little less impact, so it's an easier roll out the door.
No, it's easy actually. It's really easy to run to get going. Even if you walk for a first bit, you can walk for a little bit and then get going. The thing is, again, it's always about framing that run, isn't it? And thinking, well, this run's about that for me. I'm going for a coffee with my mate. We're just going to do it on a run. Rather than I've got to cover 6 miles in an hour. I haven't got any of that. I'd rather cover 4 miles and have a coffee.
And keep enjoying it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now we've got, as we can see through the grainy imagery for anyone who's watching this on the vlog.
It's dark.
It's getting dark now. It is depressingly, well, it's 5:45. It's pitch black outside. You have clearly, as we know, a strong running background, but also there was duathlon time, there was the Ironman triathlon time. So indoors, simple question, quick fire round.
No,
Treadmill or turbo?
neither. Doesn't matter
Said
how
with
bad it
passion.
is. Well, I've done both. I've done both for a long period of time. You know, turboed in garages, you know, like in pools of sweat for hours. No, I'd rather go out. Don't care what it's doing. I'd rather go out. Decent head torch, high vis bit of kit. Don't care if it's chucking it down. I'll get out.
And what about your? So that's it. The head torch, high vis bit of kit, very useful as well. Any other? Let's just say inclement weather. Going with the quote, I forget who it's from. There's no such thing as bad weather, only incorrect equipment. Yeah. What are you keeping as your staples in your kind of autumn, winter, all year round run?
Range. That makes me sound posh, doesn't it? In my range.
Yeah, in your
mate,
kit.
Honestly, it's simple. Pair of trainers, pair of socks, pair of shorts, t-shirt, long sleeve, jacket, done.
Hat, gloves,
I very
tights.
rarely run in anything else. So if it's cold, I'll wear gloves. If it's really raining, I'll wear a cap. That's it.
Simple.
It is, yeah, that's it. There's nothing, it doesn't need to be more complicated than that. If it's really cold, I'll put another layer on. Mostly my best piece of kit is a jacket that I can, it's lightweight enough to run in. It's not, you know, a massive flappy coat, but, you know, I can take it off if I get hot, because usually I do, you know, I can just roll it up, tie it around my waist, off I go. Done.
Do you ever go for the backpack idea?
You can't muck around with these things, Warren. You can't. You know, if it's a little bit of rain or a bit of darkness, and you think, well, it's only that. Get out, sit inside, procrastinating about it. It'll be your window to do it. Will be gone.
It will vanish. Yeah, no, I mean, I have to say that the turbo with a little bit of interactivity makes that a lot more viable. Again, particularly, I'm going to use it as an excuse again. Being in central London, it's not what I want to do. Go and spend an hour cycling around Regent's Park in the dark, or alternatively, get on the turbo. That seems to be a bit better. But the running, you're right. The idea of having a treadmill at home just seems ridiculous. Or going to a gym to run on a treadmill when I could be running outside.
I've never had a treadmill at home, so never had a treadmill at home. But I have had lots of turbo trainer things at home.
And presumably as well at a time when they were not interactive and they were just miserable.
So you just have to sit there in your own head.
In your own sweat. Maybe with a sort of tape player going, but hopefully with auto reverse, so it would go long enough.
Yeah, but you used to, you know, just put a bit of music on and away you go. You know, it's quite simple. You know, that I've actually realised I'm quite purist and a little bit old school with stuff. I like connecting with the simplicity of running. You know, and I don't really like the unnecessary frills that you don't need. If you want to go for a run, put the basic kit on and get out and go running.
Yeah, and that is where it scores. There's very little required in the way of equipment or in the way of you can do it anywhere you go. It travels easily, but then we can have slight issues. One thing I've noticed doing more cycling the last few years is cycling clearly takes a lesser toll on the body, but all the time I would have previously spent in rehab stroke, prehab stroke, foam roller would have been used instead for getting the bike sorted out. You've snapped an Achilles tendon. Any particular tips for keeping the body going long term? So
one thing I've got better at and have now got a little bit worse at is looking after. I want to be stronger at 50 than I was at 40. That doesn't mean I want to be a better runner. I want to be stronger at 50 than I was at 40. So that's actually getting close now. A couple of years, and so I spent a few months earlier this year in the gym, working quite a lot on strength, and I felt much better. I need to now revisit that, and then, you know, I'm good. That's my focus. Is the best thing to ensure kind of continuity now is to not get injured, and to not get injured, I need to supplement my running with strength work. And, you know, today I walked for a bit, probably 15 minutes in the middle of my run today, and then I ran back.
So that's a a longevity tip going in the advancing years. Let's turn the clock back quickly. Go to younger years, kids, because that's what ties into Stormbreak, the charity that you've started, to improve mental health and movement for kids. Do you want to just give us a quick rundown on that? Because with your background and passion for everything you've done, this looks like another big project with an awful lot of love behind it.
Well, definitely that. Stormbreak is a charity. I founded it about 18 months ago. We're working in some schools in Dorset and Hampshire at the moment. We are working to try and help staff at the school understand what mentally healthy movement looks like, and then to be able to deliver it in their schools every day. And it's got a specific focus on mental health in primary years and primary education. So it's tough, to be really honest. You know, starting a charity is difficult. I've never done it before. I don't know lots of things. It's a massive challenge. It's really time and labor intensive. There's a lot of people that are, helping for nothing. I've got minimal budgets. It's quite stressful and difficult and uncertain and unstable. All of those things, there's no training plan for how to do it. So I'm kind of guessing as I'm going. But I'm hoping that, what the work that I'm putting in will be worth it, for not so much for me, but for other people, as we try and shift cultures in schools for movement to be right at the forefront of promoting mental health. So that's what we're trying to do.
Well, look, it looked like it's such a simple premise. You made the point I think I saw on the website, mental health problems in children are rising, movement in children is falling. There are two fairly simple things. You try and reverse that tide by bringing a background into schools. I mean, it sounds like a brilliant project. And again, running is a simple thing that gives us so much.
Yeah, and it's loads more than, it's not a running thing. It's quite broad. We just launched an all-party parliamentary group report into mental health and movement. There's, we've got a partnership with Bournemouth University doing some research. We've got some Stormbreak coaches working in schools. We've got some teachers already doing some stuff. We've got a fantastic board of trustees, but we lack operational budgets and time and a few skill sets. So it's much needed. So I may as well give it a go, eh?
No, I mean, absolutely. It sounds and looks wonderful. So if anybody is looking to get involved, donate money,
give me a ring.
Become a trustee, do anything, give Martin a call, drop him a line. We'll put all of your details in the show notes, Martin, but best place is Stormbreak is stormbreak.co.uk?
.org.uk.
Right, stormbreak.org.uk. That'll be down there. Yelling Performance, do we want that in there as well? Your coaching?
Marathon Talk is, the podcast that I've been doing for a decade with my buddy Tom Williams. In fact, I've got to record that in 15 minutes ago, so I better crack on and do it.
There you go. Look, we got so much in there that in that whole time we forgot to mention 512 episodes in of Marathon Talk as well, just on the side.
I know.
Martin, thanks so much for making the time. Enjoy episode 500 and whatever number it is you're about to put together now. And very good catching up with you this afternoon.
You too, bud. Take it easy.
You too. So there you have it, folks. Please give a great big hand to Martin Yelling. If you didn't fancy going running beforehand, I bet you bloody well fancy going now. I know I certainly do. But before you go, don't forget to check out the show notes, because you might want to catch up with Martin on his podcast, at Marathon Talk. You might want to check out some of his coaching wisdom at Yelling Performance, or you might want to dive deeper into the world of his charity to help children's mental health and well-being, Stormbreak. All the links are in the show notes below, as are the links to our store at 33fuel.com, where if you happen to be peckish, if you happen to need to stock up for your next race, if you just happen to want to make your sports nutrition a little bit or even quite a lot better, well, that would be the place to go. We've got everything you could possibly need. Check it out at 33fuel.com. Thanks very much for joining me on this show, and look forward to seeing you at the next one.